What is happening, my lit and film friends? We are gathered here together, or not together, on the occasion of discussion. Channel my inner prince. Uh, uh, to discuss Philip K. Dick's "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?" Okay, so if you hear me say the word "DADOES," that means "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?" Okay, it's a common abbreviation for the work amongst those of us who are nerds. So let me say a brief word about Philip Dick. He was born in 1928 and died in 1982, which is not a bad run when you consider his personal habits, which included drug addiction um, uh, and that is reflected in his almost all of his fiction. Like almost every science fiction writer, Dick had to be exceptionally prolific to continue to make a living um, because science fiction doesn't make much money. So he wrote a ton of books. Um, uh, I don't have a total recall of everything, uh, but there's a lot of them. This one was published in, let me check my notes, at some point in the 60s, I think, 68. Um, and so I'm going to cover the main sort of thematic topics of the work, or what I see as being the more important um, aspects of the work, things to think about. Um, of course, as always, you're not required to follow my interpretation. You're not required to agree with everything I say. Uh, you are, not only are you free to, but I encourage you to disagree with what I say. So, uh, before I do that, let me hit a couple points of housekeeping here. Papers. I continue to get emails about papers. I don't know how many times I have to say this because I don't know how many times people are watching the lectures. But uh, just write your papers and send them to me. The sooner you write them, the better it is. Um, I don't know what else to say about it. I mean, I need 3 papers from each of you. And without that, without getting 3 papers from each of you, you are going to receive an incomplete, which means that you're going to have to drag it out and then write a paper later and blah, blah, blah. So please, let's not go down that road. Let's, um, uh, uh, let's take care of each other, shall we say. Um, okay, so do androids dream of electric sheep? I mean, I could, there are a lot of places to start with this book. Um, a lot of jumping off points, because there were a lot of big ideas that Dick wants to um, interface with. Um, and so I guess we can start with the first chapter and the idea of the way that humans alter their conscience. Seashells by the seashore, alter their consciousness. Um, so there are basically 2 modes. Introduced right off the bat to us in book 1. There's the mood organ and the empathy box. Okay, so the mood organ Dick uses to really good comic effect, insofar as uh, uh, right. the novel gets comic, but uh, where you can do things like set it to any frequency that you want to watch what's on TV, no matter what's on. That's one setting, and then there's another setting that is which Deckard tries to um, uh, do to his wife, which is oh gosh, I can't remember the exact. My book is in my office at work, and so I don't have it at hand. Um, but it's something like resigned consentment to the correctness of your husband. If that's not the exact words, that's pretty close. I just realized. Oh no, here it is. I thought I forgot my water. So this is basically mood manipulation sort of thing, and then you have the empathy box, which we'll come back to that later. It's tied in with the religion slash philosophy of Mercerism, but this too is going to have to do with the way that we. Um, I mean, to say manipulate your consciousness is not. That's not fair. Um, I think it's more fair to say maybe something along the lines of how we how we shape the reality around us. Um, and I guess if you want to call that manipulation of consciousness, then that's okay. But um, we all do this. I mean, we all choose what we want to consume, and that shapes the way that we think about the world around us. But like I said, I'll come back to it in a minute. Okay. All right. So Deckard is married to his wife, Ron, uh, who doesn't like him. As she says in the very first chapter, keep your filthy cop's hands off me. Um, because Deckard is retired, but not totally retired. He still hunts Andes uh, for bounty. Andes are androids. That's why they're called Andes. I don't know why I need to stick this up here. If you read the book, you already know it. But Andes are the escaped androids because Earth has gone through, you know, this cataclysmic, catastrophic war, and so now they've had to farm off humans into space colonies, and part of the motivation for uh, getting humans off of Earth, because we're very stubborn about doing things that are good for us, is that they're given these androids who are otherwise indistinguishable from human beings, but lack, uh, well, they lack two things. First of all, they lack a lifespan. They will live for 6 years. And the second thing is they lack the ability to feel empathy. So we'll come back to that too at some stage. I'm just going to write it down so I don't forget it right now. I'm not going to explain it right now, but I will come back to it. But that lands us squarely in the same realm that we were with Burroughs, and that we're dealing with a dystopia. And again, I apologize. I had no idea that what was um, what has happened in our community was going to happen when I set the syllabus. These are just things that I find fun to teach and talk about, but they're not so fun now. Um, and that's as close as I'll ever come to saying a prayer. but yes. So this is another dystopia. So this is another future setting. This is 2019, I think it's set in. It's either, I can't remember if it's 2019 or 21. I could look it up, but whatever. If you're that interested, you could look it up. It's about 30, 40, it's about 40 years in the future, 50 years in the future from when Dick wrote the book and it got published. Uh, um, yeah, so some things he was right about, some things he was not right about. But yeah, okay. So um, let's talk. So, all right, let me refocus here because otherwise, if I start talking about the current American situation, I will probably end up fired. Okay. So at the very start of the semester, I gave you 4 basic modes of reading for analysis. I talked about plot, character, setting, and motif. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the plot because if you read the book, which you should have read the book by now because it was assigned to you, um, I don't feel that I need to have to go over the plot too much. When the plot points come up in the other categories, I'll talk about them. Then you have setting. The setting is probably San Francisco. It is San Francisco, and it's definitely the West Coast, definitely California, but it's San Francisco. And then halfway through the work, we find that there's this alternate reality, San Francisco, that also exists. Where so weird. It's very weird, very trippy. That part of the book. I've never found a good way to explain it, except to say that that Dick was really into his alternate realities, his alternate spaces. If I could fit it into, excuse me, a larger interpretation of the work as a whole, I would. But I think it has to do with the larger motif of decentralizing identity, right? Because like even from the very first chapter, humans, people that we assume are humans, like Deckard and his wife, and then his neighbor that he meets in in subsequent chapters, who has a real horse, and so so what we're talking about here is the motif of fake and real. So Deckard wakes up and he's in a bad mood, but he readjusts his mood organ, and then he's in a he's in a good mood, and you know, so this is a major motif throughout this novel. The distinction between what is fake and what is real, and this carries on throughout the work because Deckard begins to question whether he's real or whether he's a human or whether he's an Andy. And then you look at people, and I use the word people here, or person, actually specifically what I'm talking about, is the character of John Isidore, who has remained on Earth, done his job, but has been subject to the radiation fallout, so he's become a special or a chicken head, and so he's treated as like this lesser, like not human kind of creature. It's called a special, but the uh, um, derogatory term in the book is a chicken head. I don't think that really needs explained very deeply because it's insulting. I wouldn't like to be called a chicken head. Though I have to say I do love chickens, but that's a different story. But this whole idea of like this, like sort of like what is fake and what is real. This comes up time and time again, right? So you have the humans who use electronic um, or electronic, digital. I mean, I don't even know what word I would want to use here. Virtual, maybe virtual is probably the best word. Virtual apparatus to manipulate their own consciousness so that they can get into a space that they're really actually not in their own biophysical chemistry. Um, but then you also have you have the bad guys of the book, the androids, the Andes that have escaped and come back to Earth. Now remember, it's illegal for the Andes to be on Earth. That's Deckard's whole job, is to hunt these people down. Um, and people, these machines, down. Uh, I, and so it becomes confused as to whether not it becomes confused, but Deckard himself becomes confused as to whether he is actually an Andy or he is a human being. Um, and Dick never really resolves that particular question in any clear cut way, because Deckard is like the most unempathetic person. Well, not it's not. Well, that's not always true. I'm sorry, I overstated the case there. There are moments where he does show empathy, which is necessary for Dick's narrative purpose, because we as readers have to be in doubt. It, as to whether he is an Andy or whether he's an actual human. Um, so again, it comes back. I'm just riffing on this idea of fake and real here, so you get into there's this alternate San Francisco that exists, and was that one the fake one? Is this one the real one? Was that one the real one? Is this one the fake one? Then you get into just the appearance of the Andes, like Rachel and Pris are described. So I don't want anybody to put this in their papers, please, because I don't want to hear about this because it's an obvious difference. But in the movie, Rachel and Pris look totally different to one another. But in the book, Rachel and Pris are to Deckard. He sees the same model. He sees the same person. So he sleeps with Rachel, but he, you know, retires Pris in the end, but not without some pangs of consciousness. Okay, so the motif of fake and real. The setting is important. In the book, it's set in this post-apocalyptic place, San Francisco. And the defining feature of the landscape is this thing called kipple. And what kipple is just settling gray dust. It's just decay. As the decay works its way inwards to the places of population, it piles up more and more and more. So I know I talked about this to you before. I'm going to talk about it to you again. Too bad if you don't like it. This is PK Dick's take on consumerism. That what is around us is it's just falling apart all the time. And we'll be willing to pay more and more for the things that we want as those same things begin to fall apart. So this brings us to another motif the motif of animals. There's a reason why sheep is in the title of the work, because animals function as a motif for our own desire to consume. Um, um, so early in the book, Deckard has a conversation with his neighbor. His neighbor owns a real horse that he hopes to breed and get another horse. And the ideal is that you have a real animal. Unfortunately for Deckard, he did once have a real sheep, but he got kind of slack on it, and then the real sheep died because of his slackness, which is to say that he bought it a bale of hay, but he failed to take all of the barbed wire out of it. So the sheep, while it was eating the hay, bit down on the barbed wire, got tetanus, and died. Right, which calls into question whether Deckard truly has empathy. Like, if you're not good at taking care of your real animals, and this is okay, so I'm going back to this idea of the objective correlative. In this work, the objective correlative is animals, right? So Deckard has a real animal, can't take care of it, it dies. Not once, but twice, right? Has a real sheep, died of tetanus, gets a fake sheep, right? Later in the work, after he retires a bunch of Andes, he buys a real goat, and then Rachel pushes it off the rooftop, right? So twice, 2 times in this work, he loses a real animal. But animals are status symbols, right? So they're standing in as these kind of symbols of American consumerism. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, if you read the work, you'll know exactly what I mean. There's a animal booklet, animal guide. I know none of you will know what I'm talking about here because y'all grew up in the internet age. But back in the day, when you wanted to buy something, you'd get a catalog and it would come in the mail, and you'd flip through it and you'd look for the best deal on the thing that you wanted, right? So yeah, all right, I won't go too deep into it. I'm sure you don't want to hear about it. Ask your grandparents if you want to really know about that. But so there's a booklet, and it lists the prices of animals, and not available, not available, not available, and you have to kind of go down it. So, but it's like the way that we would way back in the day, we would look at cars, right? What car do I want? And you'd flip through this book, and can't afford that, can't afford that, can't afford that, and you finally what you kids would call scroll down to, what back in my day we would call flip to. We'd be like, oh, used 86. Oh, it sounds pretty good. Only it's $2,600. Um, so that's the whole motif of consumerism throughout the work, and it centers around the way that and animals too, animals and consumerism, and it would be remiss of me not to mention that there is also an ecological element to this book. There's an idea of the extinction of species, and how human activity affects extinction of species, because it's there too. I'm not gonna. I won't go on about that right now, but it's there if you want to find it. It's definitely there. So talked a little about motif. Talked a little about setting, character. Of course, they all these things. Of course, they all blend into each other. And so you get to the character. You get the character of Deckard, who floats between this idea of whether he's real or whether he is himself as an Andy. Um, um, Oh, I'm going to write something down right now before I forget it, because this is important. In fact, I might talk about it right now. Okay, so here is a good episode. Comes about a third of the way through the book, and it says Deckard has received his instructions about retiring all the different Andes, and he does it, um, the first couple aren't so difficult, but then he has to retire this Andy by the name of Luba Luft. Um, Luba Luft is one of the Andes who, so Batty escaped with a group of Andes, and some of them decided to remain in seclusion. We'll come to that when we get to the end of the work. Whereas others of them tried to kind of blend into regular human society, and Luba Luft was one of those. And the way that she tried to blend into human society was through, I guess she was programmed to be, or she taught herself to be, I don't know exactly, but a brilliant opera singer. Dick was a big classical music opera fan. So not many rock music references in this work, more classical music, but anyway. Um, uh, but that doesn't matter. That's not important. What's important is that another motif in this work is the motif of art. So Deckard, on his journey to go out and retire Lubaloo, she's in practice, and he's just waiting for the practice to end, and he can't tell the difference between her and any of the pre-war recordings of other great opera singers that are, by definition, human. He can't tell the difference. He thinks she's just as great as they all are, which starts the process of him calling into question himself. How much empathy does he have? How much does he feel for other people? And so he ends up retiring Lou Balouf. There's the scene with the she's the one who gets him hauled off into the virtual reality police station, and that's I don't want to say it's a tangent, but that's another thing, and I already talked about that, so I'm not going to go into that. But what's at stake here is is about art, and the relationship of art to humanity. And so, all right, talking about art, I'm going to do something. I'm going to give you a definition. I'm going to cross this out because I was going to talk about something else, but now I'm crossing that out. What art? I'll write this down. It's going to take me a minute, so be patient. And I'm also going to have to do a little bit of philosophy to explain some of the stuff. Not not technical, just technical from a philosophy sense. Now I realize I'm going to have to hold this up forever in front of the screen, but that's okay. I can talk about some of the terms here. So, what is art? The $1,000,000 question. I have your answer right here. Art is anything created by somebody that leads to understanding without needing recourse to reason. Anything created by somebody that leads to understanding without needing recourse to reason. So created means that it's like, flowers and trees and all that stuff. They're all beautiful, but they're not art as such. They can be arranged as a matter of art, but they have to be arranged. That's where the somebody comes in, right? So flowers in a field that you just happen to be walking through are beautiful. There's no doubt about that. This is not a definition of beauty. This is a definition of art. Um, uh, so, flowers, the field of wildflowers can be beautiful, but it isn't art per se. Um, if a painter comes along and paints a painting of that field and you like it, then that's art because that's something created. Okay? So it involves I'm going to take this down now because I'm tired of holding up. Pause, rewind, and pause the video if you want. Sorry, apologies. It's very hard to teach in this format without the give and take of the classroom. Because I never know if I'm coming across to you or not, or if I'm explaining things properly. I mean, you can send me emails and that, but it's not the same thing as real time interaction. So occasionally I need to draw a breath and remember my train of thought. So anything created by somebody, we talked about that. So it has to involve this is my definition. Okay, so this is not. This is not coming straight from androids. This is my definition, but I'm going to bring it back to androids in just a minute because it certainly has had an effect on my thinking about what art is and what art isn't. So anything created by somebody, so a person has to be involved in it. And so it leads to understanding. That's the complicated term. If we're going to talk strictly about philosophy in a rigid sense, because there's arguments about what understanding is or isn't, and what does it mean. And I won't get into all those right now. But you stand before a painting, and that painting moves you, and it moves you in a way that takes you to a place where you understand a thing. It either reminds you of an understanding that you have already had, or it brings you to a new level of understanding. That's more or less what I'm talking about. I'd have to do 3 hours on this to talk about this one. But so it's anything created by somebody that leads to understanding without needing recourse to reason, right? That's not to say that things that you have to use your reason for aren't also art. Like a beautiful physics equation is art. Um, uh, you know, there, but you have to be able to reason through it to understand it. Beautiful math equation, that's art. You got to go through it. A beautiful chemistry experiment in the lab, that's also art. But you have to be able to understand what's going on. You have to have this faculty of reason. The way that other kinds of artwork is that you don't need reason to understand them. When you put your headphones on and you hear a beautiful song, uh, you don't have to think about it. Kind of it sort of moves. It moves you. It brings you to a place, and you understand an emotional process, or you understand not just an emotional process, but you understand a kind of a mental process. Um, because to begin with, I think that the divide between emotion and reason is a false division. I think that but again, I don't. That's philosophy. That's the philosophy hole. So let's not let's not go down that lane right now. Uh, but I mean, geez. The debate over understanding is a debate over whether emotion and reason are separable things, and they are not separable things. And the things that you understand emotionally are not less valuable or less valid than the things that you learn by book study. That's my take on the notion of understanding. They're equally valid, they're equally important, and they are equally worth pursuing. And they equally take discipline to get to. Okay, so what was I talking about? Luba Luft. So Luba Luft, the opera singer that Deckard has to retire, is this opera singer that he thinks is just as good as anybody that he's ever heard. And um, so he has the interview with her. She challenges him to take his own empathy test, and it all goes haywire. And she calls the fake cops, and they haul him off to the you know, I shouldn't call it virtual, but the alternate reality, the the other real San Francisco. And there's episodes that happen there. I'm not going to go into those, which again require. It's all about Deckard's kind of insecurity about his own. Where am I at? 40 minutes already. They're all about his own security, about his own kind of humanness versus his own, or versus what might potentially be the fact that he's also an Andy too. Okay, so in the process of this, uh, because he is uh, allowed to well, because he's so impressed by her kind of operatic abilities, they go around a museum, him and Luba Luft, and they see a painting that she really loves by a painting called Edvard Munch. I know it looks like Munch, but that's not how you say it. He's a Swede, so different pronunciation. Edvard Munch. Okay. So some of you will know his most famous painting. It's called The Scream. If you don't know it, it'll take you about 30 seconds to do a Google image search on it. So look it up. This one is, because words can be translated, it has a Swedish title. So this is called adolescence, or sometimes it's called puberty. And it's a picture of a young woman on the edge of her bed looking out her window. Uh, and so the screen, all right, okay, so now I got to get back into philosophy. Um, I have to eat dinner at some stage. Now we're back in the same realm, the same realm. One of the things we talked about with Kafka is the philosophy of existentialism. Uh, so this is not so much it kind of is to do with Dick, but Monk is, for existentialism, he's kind of the, pardon the pun, poster boy painter for existentialism. Uh, Look at the screen. You've all seen it. If you've even seen the movie Scream, you've already seen the painting itself. Um, and then adolescence or puberty, they're all generally interpreted. I'm sure this is not universal. I am not an art historian, so I don't keep up with all the scholarship. But to my knowledge, they are generally interpreted as moments of who am I, moments. So if you remember back to our earlier conversations about existentialism, it's about weighing that you exist versus what you think the value of your existence is. So I definitely exist, but does that mean anything? Does that ultimately mean anything that I existed? Because millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people have existed before me, and they're all forgotten. But at the same time, I can also make a difference in the immediate lives of people around me. So existentialism deals with this kind of constant argument between my meaning, the fact that I exist is meaningless versus the fact that I exist can make a difference in people's lives. And there are various philosophers land on various ends of the scale. So this is the whole. This is another objective correlative in androids, is that the paintings of Edvard Munch are supposed to remind us of these questions of individual valuation or self-valuation. Maybe I should be more clear about that. Especially because he doesn't pick the screen. It's not the screen because she really likes this painting, Puberty. He doesn't pick the screen. He doesn't go with the obvious choice. He picks this other one because adolescence is a period of transition. It's a period of figuring out who you are. And that plays into the larger motifs of androids, in the sense that what Dick is engaging with here is like things becoming other things, or things realizing that they are other things, or people or individuals accepting people for being other things. So Um, right. Yeah, so you can Google image search adolescence or puberty by Edvard Munch, and you will see the painting. I love his artwork, but that's a different story. Okay, so what are we talking about here? Talked about existentialism in the painting of Munch. We talked about art. The definition of art is copyrighted by me, so don't think you're going to claim it for yourself at some point in graduate school. Talked about character, plot. Plot is plot, and if you have read the work, you'll know what the plot is. Um, so I'm going to wrap up here with what I think is the the uh, theme. I already mentioned this already, but the central theme within the work, and that is the blending between fake and real. Or I should say, like, I put a slash here that doesn't deserve a slash because deserves a squiggly line because the the ideas of fake and real are kind of obliterated in this world that Dick has created in androids. Um, and we can trace. There are many ways that we can trace this through. I'm sure I'm not gonna remember all of them. I'm gonna kick myself for not remembering all of them later. But I think um, I think that it comes out most clearly in Dick's use of animals in this work, both the fake ones and the real ones. Um, Very early in the work, you have Isidore who picks up a fake animal. He thinks it's real and it dies, or he picks up a real animal. He thinks it's fake, and then the real animal dies, and then he gets made fun of by everybody. But it turns out the owners of the family don't really care, and they just make another one, and they're fine with it, right? Consumerism, right? You have a thing that looks like the thing, and everybody thinks you have the thing, right? Same thing with Deckard early in the work, with his sheep on top of the building and his next door neighbor. His next door neighbor's animal is real, the horse. Uh, Deckard's sheep is fake, but his next door neighbor thinks the animal was real. But then Deckard says, "No, look," and he flips the electric panel off its belly and revealed to be fake. So animals are status symbols. I already talked about this in terms of consumerism. I won't go on about it. That's one element of it. But you see how, like, the fake real thing from very early in the work is beginning to be blended to them. Uh, Throughout the novel, Deckard begins to wonder whether he is himself is real or fake. He meets there's the whole Rachel thing, where there's another bounty hunter who tells him, you know, um, well, anyway, if you read the book, you know what happens. Um, and he ends up killing her. And uh, after Rachel and Deckard have their uh, tryst, it's funny. So here, okay, let me pause on this just for a moment. Rachel is an android. She's an Andy. She's of the newest generation of Andys that the Rosen Corporation has developed. because they're continually trying to make more and more. Uh, they're trying to make more and more product that is indistinguishable from humans. Uh, and so she's of the latest generation. Um, and when she and so uh, Deckard, of course, has a deeply dissatisfying relationship with his wife at home. Uh, chapter one, and so he goes off for this little romantic tryst because he got this advice from another bounty hunter that said, "Go and sleep with one, and then you'll be over it." Uh, uh, Whatever. I don't. I'm not. I don't want to. I don't. Yeah. I can't. Yeah. Um, and So he does. When he shows up, she has a present for him. She has a bottle of bourbon from before the war, which is a hugely valuable thing. They do it. And then, of course, Deckard says, I'm leaving you. This can never last, yada, yada. Takes off. So for revenge, Rachel, who is the Andy, who is not supposed to have the full range of human emotions, it gets extremely angry. And she goes and she kills the new real goat that Deckard just bought for all of the money that he got from killing all of the other Andys. I mean, so there's this constant sort of back and forth between, real and fake. Well, we're real, so we feel emotions. Well, you're fake, so you don't. Oh, but here's our fake emotions, and when we feel our fake emotions, we're going to strike back at your real emotions. So, right, that's why I made the squiggly line between fake and real. I mean, it's like if you had say you and your partner went out and saved up and saved up and saved up and finally got that car that you wanted, and then uh, you went out and cheated with somebody just because, and that person, and then you told the person you cheated with, look, it's done, it's over with. And then that person you cheated with came back with a baseball bat and destroyed your brand new car. That's kind of it's a weak equivalent. It's not a perfect equivalent, but that's kind of what happens when Rachel pushes Deckard's goat off the roof. So again, the blending between fake and real. Let me fast forward. Let me get to the very end of the book. So Deckard is successful in retiring all of the escaped Andys in the end, but of course he's hugely depressed because he has this gap between his consciousness, I exist, and his conscience. What does it mean? What is the value of my existence? So he has to get away, and as he gets away, he flies away from the city in his hover car, which maybe next year, 2021. He flies out into the desert of Kipple, right? Because remember, this Kipple is everywhere except in the urban areas. Like they're constantly fighting a battle in the urban areas. And sets his plane down, and of course he has a cigarette. And as he's looking around, he sees something move. He sees something move in the Kipple, and he thinks to himself, "What could be moving around out here? Where are my notes from before? There was a thing that I wanted to come back to, and now put them down somewhere. That's okay. I'll rewrite them later." Um, uh, so he sees this thing moving in the sand, and it turns out to be a living thing, which is strange to him because there shouldn't be any animals out in the kipple. Nothing. There shouldn't be anything living because it's like a gray, ashy wasteland. Uh, so he goes to inspect and he finds out that he picks it up and he sees that it's a toad. Okay, which is amazing. This brings us back to. I promise this is going to be the last thing I talk about. So what are we at? 55. 5 more minutes. Uh, so remember we talked about the empathy box versus the mood organ. Uh, and what the empathy box does, it allows you to tap into this kind of universe where everybody who's online at that time, they're all suffering in unison with each other. There's a whole other line of discussion. If we were in class, I could probably get deeper into this with you, but I don't want this to run over. Um, Mercerism is exposed to be a fraud in the end. Uh, uh, they say it's all run by a guy called Al Jari. That's a really, really, really inside literary joke because this is a reference to a French surrealist writer by the name of Alfred Jarry. Won't go down that road right now. Um, but what we find out is that there are two sacred animals towards Mercerism, the donkey and the toad. So what do these two things represent? Well, in Mercerism, in your experience in the empathy box, you're climbing a hill, you're constantly climbing a hill where there are unseen enemies who throw things at you, try to keep you from getting up the hill. Yes, I know, myth of Sisyphus. You can look that up and you'll see immediately what uh, um, Dick is talking about here. I'll write his name down here and hold it up. Sisyphus. If you don't know the myth of Sisyphus, it's that's what Dick is borrowing on with this whole Mercer. One of the things that Dick is borrowing on this whole Mercerism. So anyway, when you get hit by a rock, while you're in the empathy box, when you get hit by a rock, you actually get hurt for real. Like if you get hit by a rock on the arm, you get a cut on the arm. That happens to Iran in the novel, you know. But not just you, but everybody else who happens to be online. That's not Dick's phrase. That's just how we understand it now. But everybody else who's gripping, because you have to grip handles. So everybody else who's gripping the handles of the empathy box, they also get injured. When any one person gets hurt, everybody gets hurt. So there's this whole. So that's one kind of like sort of thing. And then there's another sort of alternate media reality. It's called Buster Friendly and his friendly friends, who throughout the novel promote this idea that they're going to expose Mercerism for a fraud. And finally, they do. They say that Al Jari never existed. Or I'm sorry, that Mercer never existed, that in fact he was only played by this actor by the name of Al Jari, who's in the book, he's an alcoholic who, I forget what, he lives somewhere in the Midwest, Illinois or Michigan or somewhere like, I can't remember off the top of my head. But symbolically Nowheresville, and he's just an actor on a stage. that gets projected into your mind. But the whole point of Mercerism is to emphasize the idea of empathy. It's the to emphasize the idea that no one suffers alone. And so and so the two sacred animals in the religion of Mercerism are the donkey and the toad. Why is that? Why these two animals? I mean, they seem like, why not? Like, if you're starting a religion, wouldn't you choose like freaking the eagle or the lion? Or you get the point. But these two animals are specific of two certain aspects of possession of empathy. The donkey is a beast of burden. That means it carries the load for others. A donkey on its own wouldn't carry any load. It would eat until it was full and then go to sleep. And then probably fornicate. And then eat until it was full and then go to sleep. But as a domesticated animal, the donkey represents carrying the load, others' loads. Okay, so an important part of empathy is taking up burdens that are not your own, uh, um, but up to your abilities, taking them as far as you can. What about the toad? What does the toad represent? Well, toads. So don't confuse frogs and toads. They're two different animals. Um, you're probably, well, I don't know. I don't know where all of you grew up, but around here you're way more likely to come across a frog than you are a toad. But they're two different around here. I mean, in the neighborhood of Prospect Park, you're more likely to come across a frog than a toad. But they're two different animals. Um, Toads are found, I think almost uniquely in every ecosystem. You find them in deserts, you find them in swamps, you find them in riverlands, you find them in the mountains. Uh, um, what am I leaving out? Whatever ecosystem that I'm missing here, you find toads. Uh, and so, what toads come to represent are evolution, or what I think what we're supposed to see by them in androids is as a symbol of evolution. So you got the donkey as a beast of burden, and then you have a toad as a symbol of evolution. I'm eliminating the idea of toads as being like symbols of witchcraft. I don't think that is what Dick intends here. Uh, but they are symbols of evolution, right? So both of these things come back into our idea of empathy, um, in that you have to both be able to carry other people's loads, but you also have to be able to change the things that you think when the things that you think when you are 19 or 20 are not the same things that you are going to think when you are I don't know, let's pick a random age out of the air, 49 going on 50. Uh, but they both come back into this idea of empathy. You learn to understand the people around you. You learn to understand the things that you can do for the people around you. Right. So when Deckard finds this toad, think about this for a second. Now he didn't see the toad at first. He only saw when it started to move, which meant that like it was blending in with the kipple around it. So this toad had evolved to the kipple based environment, right? So the toad evolved, okay? Like I already said, we know toads are very good at evolution and adaptation. Um, so Decker takes it home with him, gives it to his wife. Uh, this is an amazing. I mean, this is like I wouldn't say free money exactly, but this is like it's a real animal. This is a real animal. So he gets to bring it back home. It's no goat, but at least it's a real animal. So he brings it back home, and he's so tired from all of his having to do things that he goes to bed. And his wife Ron starts looking at the animal more closely, and she flips it open. She finds the control panel on its belly and flips it open, and lo and behold, it's not a real toad. It's an electric toad. Which seems to hint at the idea that the artificial, i.e., the Andes themselves, are capable of evolution, which means in its own right that they themselves are therefore capable of developing empathy. So, what is fake? What is real? And that's all I have to say about androids. I'm going to play you out for a minute with a really dystopic song. I can't play the whole song because I'll get flagged for copyright by YouTube. But that was M.E. By Gary Newman. So if you'd like to check it out. Otherwise, I miss you. I love you. Bye.